Wildfires have been on the increase in the American West for the past several decades, and the most recent wildfire that devastated LA is estimated to result in insured losses of between $5 to $9 billion, with total economic damages reaching a potential $275 billion, making this one of the costliest natural disasters in U.S. histories. Now, some are charging that the fires are getting hotter and more damaging because of global climate change. But is this the case for what happened in LA? Joining us to talk further is Danielle Franz, who is the CEO of the American Conservative Coalition, which is dedicated to mobilizing young people around the environmental action through common sense, pro-innovation, and limited government principles. Danielle, welcome to the Commonwealth Matters.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, I was just sharing with you before we started the program that in another lifetime, I was involved with wildlife management. In fact, I did some work, and you didn't know this about me, in your home state of Minnesota. I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when I was right out of college. We monitored conservation reserve program lands to assess whether or not the government was getting its money's worth in producing the increasing the duck population. So I worked in the southwest part of Minnesota, Chickayo, Minnesota, the prairie pothole region of the country. Beautiful area, by the way, especially in summer.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to agree. And actually, my upbringing in Minnesota is part of why these issues are so near and dear to my heart. I grew up in rural America, a really small town. It was a big deal when our population signed past 300. And as you can imagine, in a town that small, there's not a lot to do but go outside and play with your siblings. And so that's really where my love for the environment was born and why I think it's so important that conservatives engage on this issue.
Yeah, so I think, Danielle, you and I are of a similar mindset. We're both conservatives, and we both care deeply about the environment and about being good stewards of the resource. So I guess we'll start with this. How did the political left get in a place where they have dominated this space, where they're influencing young people and how to think about the environment? And conservatives seem to be few and far between in this space, don't they?
Yeah, it's really a shame that we've come to this point where the left owns the narrative on environmentalism because it wasn't always that way. The right actually has a very strong and proud history of environmental stewardship, dating all the way back to President Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, Richard Nixon. There are so many, conservative icons who really cared about this. And I think the Conservative Party and the conservative movement still really values those sort of American ideals of the frontiersman and the outdoorsman and the conservationist. I think this issue really ran away from us when we started seeing climate change just dominate the narrative, and climate change became this culture war issue where suddenly these climate activists don't represent the majority, but they do have the microphone and they are very loud. And they're doing things like throwing soup on paintings and blocking traffic and making people late to work. And most Americans don't feel represented by that approach to stewarding our environment. And so I think conservatives stepped back a little bit and said, okay, this is a left-wing issue now. And I think that's a mistake. I think we should reclaim our heritage here and talk about how it is conservative to conserve our natural world and our natural heritage.
Yeah, that's well said. I look back at my education at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, where I studied wildlife management, biology, and resource management. And I think it was in my senior year when I really began to notice that there were two camps in the College of Natural Resources. You had conservationists, and these were primarily the hunters, the fishermen, the students that wanted to be foresters and wildlife managers, and those who recognized that we were stewards of the resource and that there should be multiple uses that were managed for. So that was the conservation camp. And then there was the environmentalist camp, where this was the very, very low impact, leave it as it is mindset. Nature's to be observed and allowed to run its own course. And that was represented by, I went to school with some kids who were part of Earth First, which is a militant environmental organization that organization would resort to environmental vandalism to make points. But anyways, I saw these two camps emerging back then, and that was a long time ago. Is this something that you see today? Is this something that's evident today? You have the two camps of how to look at the environment and the natural world.
Yeah, I think this dynamic is really prevalent today, and we sort of refer to it as this idea of preservation versus conservation. Preservation tends to take the approach of no, no, stay out of wild spaces. You know, humans will only ruin what they touch, leave nature alone to thrive. It's perfect and it's pristine without us. Conservation tends to take more of the approach of, well, humans are a part of nature. We're a part of this world, and we have a responsibility to steward these natural resources, and we can use them responsibly and actually leave them better than we found them. And so I think that is a real tension that you see in environmentalism, is this idea of, okay, do we preserve the environment or do we conserve the environment? And I tend to believe that, you know, we are a part of the environment and we should be, living and thriving together and not separately.
Let's go back to this devastating fire in Los Angeles. About $275 billion in estimated economic damage altogether is what it's going to come down to. You wrote a column in National Review, and you came down on the side that this was not an issue of global climate change causing it as much as it was an issue of negligence. You pointed out that the mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget significantly, that reservoirs have gone dry, that fire management practices have not been employed when it comes to managing the forest. And this is what you'll say. I'm going to read this short paragraph here. Instead of taking responsibility for their failure to act, California's leaders have repeatedly tried to shift the blame to climate change. But while the climate may play a role in exacerbating dry conditions, these fires are fueled by human negligence, not an inevitable force of nature. Poor forest management practices in California have resulted in dense, overcrowded forests that are essentially tinderboxes. Regardless of climate change, Californian forests are prone to uncontrolled wildfires. Ignoring basic forest stewardship while crying climate change is nothing more than a convenient excuse to justify inaction. Strong words that you said there. Have you gotten pushback, first of all, from this column that you wrote in National Review?
Well, I think there's always a little pushback because people want to make very clear that they believe that climate change plays a significant role in these fires. And I'm very willing to admit that climate change plays a role, but it is not the driving force behind why these fires are so devastating. And I think that we have a duty to call out that it doesn't have to be this way. I think what's most devastating about these fires is that every single year we go through fire season and we just stand by and watch our communities be destroyed, watch our forests be destroyed. And we know that forest fires are a natural cycle of the earth and that they're going to happen, but there are things we can do to mitigate or to adapt to that. And we don't do them. Because again, we have this preservationist mindset of nature is fine, leave it alone, don't touch it. And we're destroying lives because of it. And it's really too bad. So they are strong words, but I feel quite strongly that there are better solutions to this issue. And it's irresponsible to just sit by and watch it happen each year.
Of course, California has some of the most beautiful old-growth forests in the world. My wife and I had a chance to go to Yosemite National Park last year and also Sequoia National Park. And I encourage anybody who's ever if you have a chance to go, go. Both of those parks are absolutely amazing. When you are underneath the canopy of a sequoia grove, it is breathtaking. But I learned while I was there, Danielle, that fires have in the Sierra Nevada range have killed between 31 to 42% of the large sequoias after the Castle Fire went through the Sierra Nevada. 10% to 14% of all large sequoias across the tree's natural range in the Sierra Nevada were decimated by that fire, and all totally preventable. I had a chance to talk with one of the naturalists there in the area who explained some of this to me. And as I was hearing this, it just made me I was angry because this is preventable. And these trees are so amazing and so beautiful. And then to see them just wasted because of poor forest management practices, that was disheartening. And so I guess here's my question too. Have we seen a change in federal policy in the last 4 years? The Castle Fire in California, that was 2020 that took place, so less than 5 years ago. Have we seen a change in federal or state policy to prevent this from happening again to our old growth forests?
Well, first of all, you're right. It is absolutely disheartening. And I don't know how anyone could hear that statistic and think that we are doing things right at present. I think that's pretty clearly indicative of us needing to do something differently. Active forest management is actually something that President Trump has spoken quite prolifically about, and he's made his stance on active forest management very, very clear, and he's actually received a lot of pushback from it. And so I do think we're going to continue to see this be a topic at the federal level and at the state level. But unfortunately, something just has to change because what we're doing is not working.
You go on to say in your column in National Review that federal agencies have prioritized fire suppression over proactive forest management, especially allowing the excessive buildup of dry vegetation, essentially creating a tinderbox that fuels more devastating wildfires. When we were visiting Yosemite last year, we did notice that some areas, actually, we did see the devastation where several hundreds of acres were just burned out. Entire mountainsides were just burned out. But then we also noticed that there were parts of the forest where it looked like they were gathering the debris, the tree limbs and the leaves, and they were very large piles there. So it looks like something is happening there where they're trying to get rid of the tinderboxes, if you will. Are you aware of any state efforts that, so we talked about federal efforts, but do you know if the state of California is doing anything?
I'm actually not sure on the heels of this fire. I hope it's something that they're strongly considering because, again, this happens every single year. So you would hope that this is something that we can learn lessons from. I also think you can always really tell people who've spent a lot of time in the woods or in the forest versus those who spend most of their time in urban areas. Because if you've spent any time in a forest, you know that clearing that underbrush and clearing that debris actually is vital to a healthy, thriving natural ecosystem.
Often when forest management practices are pursued, there's lawsuits. Environmental organizations will cite, the Endangered Species Act or some other federal regulation to halt good forest management practices. And Danielle, the irony is that when they halt practices that are going to minimize the possibility of huge wildfires, and then when the wildfire hits, it's actually destroying a lot of species, isn't it? It's not just killing the trees and the undergrowth, but a lot of species are damaged and eliminated as well.
Yeah, and I think this is honestly a critique that I have of the environmental movement at large, even outside of the context of wildfires, because so many environmental groups have started using litigation as a means to do policy and get the outcomes that they want. And we see that in all different sorts of policy areas. You see that in climate change, where these far left groups like the Sierra Club or Extinction Rebellion or what have you say that they want more clean energy, but then when clean energy projects are opposed, they sue them and they won't let them build. And so really you see a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of unclear priorities from the environmental movement because they can't seem to decide what it is that is most important to them. Is it preserving nature, period? Is it reducing emissions? Is it protecting wildlife? I think the environmental movement has a lot of hypocrisy that turns people away.
There's a proverb that says, when a land transgresses, it has many rulers, but with a man of understanding and knowledge, its stability will long continue. The idea here is that when people live without regard to their neighbors and without moral boundaries, then you need more government to restrain people who've gone off the rails. So if people are going to flourish, God's truth must be embraced. After all, God tells us who we are, what's our purpose, and how to live in harmony with our fellow man. Christians should understand what God's Word says and how to think biblically about the issues so that they can engage well. To stay up to date with what's going on in Kentucky, subscribe to CPC's newsletter. Go to CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org to subscribe, and you can also find other resources there. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Danielle, you gave a talk not too long ago, a TED Talk, approaching this issue as a conservative, trying to find areas of commonality between conservatives and those on the political left. Have you found, and by the way, you look like you were well received on that TED Talk. Are you making headway with other groups out there, environmental groups, those who are on the other side of the political spectrum? Are you able to carry on that conversation with them?
Yeah, I think so. And with any, issue, you're going to have fringes on both sides. And those people are probably not worth trying to convince or trying to, have common ground with. But that is a very vocal minority on both sides. And, I'm a very staunch conservative. My organization is a proud conservative organization. But we do believe that the best solutions come from reaching across the aisle and finding compromise and finding common ground with one another. This is a personal passion of mine. I grew up in a very progressive household, and it wasn't until I got active in politics myself that I realized I was conservative. And so being able to find that common ground with people you may disagree with is very important to me. At the same time, I do think we have to be unapologetic about calling out the things that don't work or the things that we don't agree with so that we can find those solutions.
Yeah, and I commend you for what you're doing, especially working with young people at the American Conservation Coalition. Tell us a little bit more about that, by the way. So it's a national group. You're conservative. You have a market-based approach to conservation management and conservation policies. What are you hearing from young people across the country? Are they interested in free market ideas, smaller government ideas, things that we're talking about on this program?
They very much are. And so I'll give a little bit of backstory just for those who don't know. The American Conservation Coalition was founded in 2017 by myself and a handful of other young Republicans who cared a lot about these issues. But like you identified earlier, the right wasn't really talking about the environment and wasn't really engaged on conservation or climate change or energy in the way that it is now. Back then, if you were to talk about these issues, conservatives were really hesitant to engage. And if they did engage, it was usually from a very skeptical standpoint where they were maybe, more on the side of denying that these problems exist than trying to find or present their own solutions. And so we founded this organization to give a platform to conservatives who want to lead and want to have better options and better solutions than what the mainstream is proposing. And, the organization has just taken off since then. I think this is an issue that young people in particular overwhelmingly care about. Something like 85% of young Republicans believe that the climate is changing and that we should do something about it. I think for Republicans to not address this issue is a major liability for us as a party because this is something that is, a number 1, 2, 3 issue for so many of those millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha individuals.
The younger generation is very concerned about the environment. Came across this number, and I'm not sure if you shared it in your column or if I found it there or somewhere else, but this really struck me, and that's that nearly half of young people in the United States say that climate anxiety impacts their ability to function on a daily basis. Is this what you're saying when you're interacting with young people? This is not a topic I usually talk to them about, but is this, what does that look like? You're not able to function because of this anxiety over global climate change.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really extreme, and it is really extreme. I think young people have heard from the mainstream climate and environmental movement for so long about the dire situation we're in, whether it's that, the earth is going to end by 2030, or if we don't hit this goal, then this entire species will be wiped out. There's a lot of apocalyptic doomsday rhetoric surrounding environmental issues, and young people have really taken that to heart. A lot of young people today don't really see a future for themselves or for future generations. And so they've sort of thrown up their hands and given up. And it's a really, frankly, it's a mental health crisis when it comes to what they've heard on this issue and the fact that they don't feel motivated and don't feel that they can make an impact because what they've heard is just so negative. That's part of what we try to address at ACC by showing them that there is a conservative path forward and that our solutions do work and that they don't have to just throw their hands up and give up.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, acid rain was a big issue. Acid rain was damaging forests, particularly in the Northeast, and it was also affecting wildlife in those areas. And that was addressed. That was addressed by putting scrubbers in coal-fired power plant smokestacks, and that was it was a challenge that was there. It was a real challenge, and yet we faced it, and we dealt with it.
Well, and I think the reasons that it's so important to lead with innovation and with market-based solutions, because yes, the challenges that we face may be severe, but we have human ingenuity on our side. I mean, we are the species that put the internet in the palm of your hands. We put a man on the moon. Surely we can tackle some of these environmental challenges.
Well, Daniel, and that's a good segue to the next topic I want us to talk about, and that is that part of the preservationist, if you will, movement is to have more children is irresponsible. There are those who are working for zero population growth. And you wrote a column again in National Review addressing that, and the title was "Wanting Children is Not Shameful." And you go on to explain that many elites in our country have this anti-natalist view, and that having children is irresponsible, contributes to climate change, contributes to resource depletion, and then go on to say this: the central premise that the world's current state of turmoil makes it morally irresponsible to bring new life into it rests on a dangerously simplistic interpretation of global issues. Yes, plenty of people are worried about climate change, racism, and social inequality, but to suggest that these concerns should categorically deter people from procreation is to ignore just how resilient and adaptable humans are. People who care about these issues should be galvanized and not paralyzed by them. I'm so glad that you said that. And what you said just a few moments ago, that people are the solution, that they're not the problem. You mentioned some milestones that we have made, landing a man on the moon. We have made incredible health gains in this country. So many good things have happened, but these things have happened because of people and contributing and trying to figure out the problem, not trying to self-exterminate, if you will. Have you debated on the national stage, or debated those who believe that we should be at zero population growth, and bring your perspective to the table?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity yet, but if you know anyone who wants to debate this with me, let me know, because I would love to. And I think in a lot of ways, this ties back to the previous topic of mental health. Young people today, I think, have this anti-natalist view because they truly believe there is no worse time to be alive than right now. I think they're perhaps unwillingly ignorant to history and to some of the issues that we have overcome in the past. And they really do believe that things are worse now than they've ever been. I would push back very strongly against that notion. But the other thing I'd say here is I think that this anti-natalist worldview really takes away the motivation that we would have towards solving these problems. I think the reason I care so much about these issues is because I have fond memories of my childhood playing in the woods in Minnesota, and I want my kids to enjoy that someday and have those same memories. And I'm doing this for the next generation because I want them to inherit something as wonderful as what I inherited. And by removing that motivation and that love of people and that love of our communities, what else do we have?
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. When we approach the issues at the Commonwealth Policy Center, we have a biblical worldview. And when I say that, I mean that we believe there's a God who created the heavens and the earth, and that God also created mankind in his image. But then we also read in Genesis chapter 1 that God put Adam and Eve in the garden to take care of it and to keep it and to develop it. And this is a Judeo-Christian idea. And there's something that I think we have forgotten, that the earth, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, but he puts us here to steward it. And Danielle, if there are people not here to steward it and to care for it, it doesn't mean that it's going to go back to some kind of a state of bliss, but actually it would go into a state of decay and disarray, like we're seeing with the wildfires. I want to pick up on something you were just saying about why it's important to have families and children. You say strong families form the foundation of stable communities and cultural continuity. And then you emphasize that bringing children into the world is hopeful, life affirming. It's the life affirming act that should be encouraged and not shamed. And again, I just reiterated what you were saying, but that is so good. We do not hear enough of this. Our young people are not hearing enough of this. And I commend you for stating that. And so are you hearing from young people? Are they resonating with what you're saying? They need a hopeful message, a life affirming message?
I think when they hear it, it shocks them and they sort of have that wake up call. But I think that before they hear it, too often young people are missing the forest for the trees. And the environmentalist mindset, particularly the preservationist mindset, is one of, okay, the earth is special, leave it alone, let it do its thing. But what they're missing is the reason why the earth is special. This world is so special because life exists here. And so life itself is worth protecting. If you're just protecting the planet for the sake of the planet, well, what makes it different than any other planet? We have to very boldly affirm that it is life itself that makes this planet special and worth protecting.
Yeah. That's great. Danielle Franz of the American Conservation Coalition. It has been great to have you on the Commonwealth Matters. Tell us how people can learn more about you and get in touch.
Yeah, you can find out more information about my organization, the American Conservation Coalition, at acc.eco. That's acc.eco. You can also follow us on social media at acc_national.
Very good. Danielle Franz, thank you so much. God bless, and you keep up the good work.
Thanks, Richard.